This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
All right, there he is, the man, the myth, the legend. That is Cameron Wolfe. How you feeling, baby? You feeling good?
Yes, sir. Big O, how you feeling?
I'm feeling good, man. I can't complain. Let me take a poll question with you because I couldn't get Poupart to agree with me at all. He just couldn't feel it. Omar did. Marcel did. I think Joe Shad also did. So let's see where you stand on this. Okay, now let's make sure you don't misinterpret what I'm saying. He hasn't made a bit of a difference. We don't know if he's the guy or not whatsoever. And yes, I understand that there's always a honeymoon period with every coach and they meet the new coach and all of that. But is it not obvious to you that Mike McDaniel has made an impression on his players?
No, I think that is obvious. I think just listening to some of the players speak, especially the players who didn't know him, like I put a little bit more stock in players who just met him versus players who were with him in San Fran or were coached with him, because you're always going to say things great about a coach that you know. But yeah, hearing Tyreek Hill talk about him and meeting him in his interactions here, Xavier Howard and Emmanuel Agba talk about him.
I think Tyreek called him cool.
Yeah,
yeah,
right? Okay. Yeah. He compared him to his references as Shrek. Said he was the funniest head coach he's ever been around. And you heard Emmanuel Agba and Xavier Howard talk about the positive new energy, right, in the building. So I think
by the way, how many times have you ever heard Xavier Howard elaborate about anyone?
Yeah. Not the most talkative dude at all, right?
Yeah. He was talkative about Mike McDaniel. To me, that was like the checkmate on the board. Like, I was like, okay. So, and this is what I was trying to explain to Poupart, that I think where he succeeded early on is in the communication, the connection. And I think it's really important with these young guys to connect with them. And I think that he left that impression that he connected. Now, he'll win them over by winning and meeting their incentives and getting them into the playoffs and all that other crap that we know that he's got to prove. But at least he has left an impression that I think he opened the door to their hearts and their minds, like, okay, I'm going to give them a chance, in other words.
No, I think that's definitely fair. I think when you have a new head coach, especially a coach coming after one who created so much controversy, from what he did based on whether you liked him or you're not. He was a very controversial coach, as you agree. I think you didn't like him, but there were people who did like him and worried about why he got fired. So you come into a situation where there's always already a little bit of chaos. So your job is to make things calm, but also create your own identity. So I think that he's been really good at being himself, but also creating himself to be a guy that people can relate to. So I've seen that. I've talked to players who have optimism. Now, we haven't won any games yet, and that's something you talked about in the top. Like, it's easy to have a love affair at this point. We haven't won any game. We haven't gotten into a tough situation, but I think it's encouraging for Dolphins fans that the level of optimism around Mike McDaniel hasn't just dissipated after the week after he got hired. It's kept going. It's been from players. It's been from coaches. It's been from people inside the building, outside the building. I've found it hard to hear somebody say a negative word about him over the last month.
I'm with you there. All right. The Dolphins made a move today. One of the things that I talked about on the show the last couple of days was that the Dolphins did everything to make Mike McDaniel's transition seamless as possible. They signed all the defensive players. They brought back the defensive staff. They kept the special teams staff pretty much together. They wanted to make sure that he didn't have to worry about replacing X or replacing Agba or replacing the defensive coordinator or the special teams coach or any of that. He just has to worry about the offense. Well, if you also want to make his transition a little easier too, make sure you sign a punter. Yeah, I get it that the kid from San Diego State is good and you could take a chance on a young punter, but you still don't know what a young punter is going to do. So if you want Chris Grier to succeed with this coach, go sign Moorhead, because that'll make your coach's transition that much easier, because now that's one less headache for Mike McDaniel to have to worry about. Agree or disagree?
Right. You hope you don't use the punter that much, right? That's the goal. But I think
Well, no,
that
you're
as you
going to
go,
use him. You're going to use him, so you make sure he flips the field for you. Make sure he doesn't shank it because he's
right.
young and nervous. And all of a sudden, now Mike McDaniel's got a young punter that he's got to walk. Now he's got to worry about, can I put the punter in this position or not? Whereas now with Moorhead, he doesn't have to worry about a damn thing. He's got a
Yeah.
Pro Bowl caliber punter now.
Right. And so you see the value of special teams in signing a guy like Morstead. You also go, and I think this is very important, you go into a draft, particularly this one, when you don't have a lot of premium picks, of not having any obvious needs. And so that allows you to truly get a best player available. You know, if you're going in the draft with literally no competition for punter, then you're putting yourself in a hole where you have to draft one. So
Right.
I think this is a good move in that, like you said, it creates freedom. And there's no area I can look at the Dolphins roster and say they have to get a player here. Like, yeah, it would be nice to get another linebacker. Yeah, it would be nice to get another center or something of that sort. But I don't think they have to get anything.
What'd you think of the visitor this afternoon for the Miami Dolphins at middle linebacker? Your thoughts on the former Alabama linebacker visiting Miami?
Yeah, from a football perspective, if he's healthy, and that's a big question because he's been injured the last couple of years, then why not, take a low chance flyer on him? I would want to check out the off-field stuff because he's obviously had a checkered background, and so I'm very careful on making the judgment of people's off-field issues because I don't know their personal situation. I haven't talked to them. I don't know how they've grown, what their whole. But this team is, in particularly over the last few years, is taking chances on players who are sort of high risk guys, maybe high reward guys, low risk guys, and giving them maybe a second chance. So to me, if you're not committing anything to his contract and give him a chance in training camp, I don't see anything wrong with that. I just think that you probably should have lower expectations for Reuben Foster than maybe his name value because he hasn't contributed in the league, for the last really 2 or 3 years.
I'm with you. That is, I think you nailed it, dude. I mean, that's perfect because he's out 2 years. He's had a lot of off the field issues too, on top of all of that. So that's another thing, that he's a guy you really can't trust. He has to earn your trust in
Absolutely.
a way, and he can't ask for anything. So if I will say this, if somehow or another he can screw his head on right, which would be my first concern with Reuben Foster, then I would bring him in just because you need the body. It doesn't matter. It doesn't hurt you to bring him in and see if he can play. And if he can't, you can end up cutting him. But if there's any kind of commitment that you actually have to make to him monetarily, then no, you can't do that with Reuben Foster at this point in time. This is either training camp fodder, or you cannot bring a guy like Reuben Foster on with any kind of expectations.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think just like the Isaiah Wilson thing, I'm not saying it's going to work out as bad as that, but you bring in a guy, and if he helps you, great. If he doesn't, you don't blink an eye. And I think that's what I look at for these type of situations. If you come in and think, oh, he's going to be our starter middle linebacker in week 1, then I think your expectations are way higher than they should be.
I'm with you there, no doubt. You like the signing of John Jenkins? More continuity and depth, obviously, that they needed.
Yeah, I do. I do have some questions on, are they going to be able to reach that next level with their defense? I hope they don't feel like they've plateaued. But I do like the idea of John Jenkins. He's a guy that you weren't spending a lot of money on. He's a veteran. People love him in that locker room. And he's playing a position where he's a big dude who can plug up a lot of holes. It's not a pretty position, but he can be that backup nose tackle behind Raekwon Davis, and he can do it for pretty cheap. So I like the move. I think that, they've been running it back. That's been the message of the defense. Offense has been, we're going to flip this whole thing around. It's a completely different offense, completely different personnel. But defense, they've largely brought back everyone. I can't think of anybody of significance that they haven't brought back from last year's defense. So you'll see a lot of that old defense. We talked about it, when they were hiring Mike McDaniel. They felt like they were close on defense, and they just felt like they needed a lot of work on offense, and they would get there. And so their offseason moves have told us that too, that they feel like they're good on D.
I'm with you there. I wouldn't be surprised if that fourth or one of those 2 7th-round picks, you'll see another young defensive tackle that could be in the mix, and then they'll try to see if they can either keep him in the rotation or stash him on the practice squad or something like that down the line. All right, let me ask you 2 questions coming off the Brian Flores lawsuit. First of all, your thoughts on Ray Horton and Steve Wilkes now joining the lawsuit.
Yeah, I think that when I reported about this early on, we all talked about this. I told you guys that, hey, there's multiple coaches who want to kind of join this. And so these are a couple of the more notable names of coaches who've done it. I think that what's interesting to watch here, if you're like following this from a legal case perspective, is that Brian Flores and his team want to move this or keep this in the public terms of things as far as the litigation, whereas the Dolphins and NFL want to bring this into private litigation so that it's held in arbitration behind the court. So when you have a class lawsuit where there's multiple people involved that are suing multiple players, that helps keep it public. So I think that was my biggest reaction from it, is you seeing these coaches maybe help his case stay in the public eye of view. As far as their individual responses, like I thought it was very damning hearing Mike Mularkey talk about the situation in Tennessee and their interview situation and why he felt like that was a sham interview, and Mike Mularkey essentially confirmed it, Ray Horton. And then hearing about Steve Wilkes, it kind of tells a lot of the issues that black coaches have dealt with as far as feeling like they got an unfair hand. Steve Wilkes got one year with a quarterback he didn't want. And, the year later, they hired Cliff Kingsbury to pick his own quarterback. So I think that it's more eye-opening from the Dolphins' perspective. Obviously, the Steve Ross thing is going to be what catches a lot of fans' eyes, him memorializing. I think we talked about this when this first happened. Why didn't he say anything when he first heard the taking situation? Well, the new lawsuit says he sent a letter to all the people in the building who have significance back in 2019. So that would show that he did make this a issue back then. And I think that does complicate things a little bit from the Dolphins side.
Well, we have to see the memo first and see what the details in that memo are, because if there's no mention of money or anything in it, then, that's the whole thing. And back to your old stomping grounds, Tennessee. I talked about this, and this is one of those situations because I've been in this position before as a boss. And I've interviewed somebody that I liked right from the get-go. And I had a couple of other interviews set up, and I still did the interviews, but I already knew who I was hiring. Right. And sometimes you hire the people that you're comfortable with. And so apparently they knew that they were comfortable with Mularkey, but then they went through the process. But you call it a farce. But what happens if, because the president came out and said, well, she liked Mike, but she then went through the process just in case to see if there was anybody else. That's exactly what the Steelers did. They loved Russ Grimm, but then they went through the process and then they fell in love with Mike Tomlin. They were going to hire Russ Grimm. And it's so natural. Anybody that's been in the boss's position, you fall in love with people that you know or like or hire or interview, and you could have 8 interviews, and the first one sucked, the second one sucked, and then the third one knocked you out. And in your mind, you may not tell anybody, but subconsciously you already hired that person. And the fourth interview, you're measuring it by the third. And the fifth interview, you're measuring it by the third. And the sixth interview, you're measuring by the third because you already hired that person. So you're already going just through the process anyway because you're happy with candidate number 3. I'm just saying that the Tennessee situation, you can't say it was racist or you can't say it was not. We don't know either. We really won't know because we're not in that person's head. She could have just been super comfortable and loved Mike, and she wanted to give him the job. Or she could be racist, and she wanted Mike because she didn't want to hire or deal with a minority and just went through the farce of the process. Either way, we really don't know. And either way, I don't know if there's any way to force this process because you can't force people to like someone. They have to like them naturally. It has to come from them, Cam.
I think that's reality, but I will say this, and there's really 2 things that you mentioned that I want to touch on. One, first of all, we weren't there in the building, so I can't tell you for sure how they felt, what their thought process was. But I will say the word that you use, comfortable, is very interesting because you talk to a lot of people who go through the hiring process, particularly Black coaches, and they talk about how they feel like the only way to change is to get owners more comfortable with them. Because, like you said, there is a comfort level that's a reality of this, right? And so yeah, you might not know exactly why this person's more comfortable than this person. It may not be race. It may just be they know this person. But I'm saying
Right.
for Black coach,
Right.
for Black coaches in general, if we want to have progress, that's the area that they want to see done. And so when you hear an example of a coach and Mike Mularkey saying they went through this process and it was not in good faith because they already knew I was the guy, then I think that's something where Black coaches are like, how do we not know we're not going through all of these interviews where
Yeah,
none of us are truly
but
considered.
Russ Grimm was the guy. He
Right.
was the guy. And then the Rooneys went through the process and fell in love with Mike Tomlin and
But but
had to go back to
but
Russ to say,
but
sorry,
but but Big O, for every Mike Tomlin situation with the Steelers, there's hundreds of other situations where
but that's my
that guy
point.
really had no chance.
You're right. You're 1,000% right. But the part that we'll never be able to answer is we can't get in their freaking minds. We don't know
Right.
which one's racist, and we don't know which one just truly loves the person. You understand
Right.
what
But
I'm
I
saying?
think
And
yes, I agree. But
how
you
do
gotta
we
hold
force
you gotta hold these people.
how do we
I think you
force
gotta hold
private
these
owners to
people.
do that? How do we
You
force
can't force them, but you have to hold them accountable if they don't go through the process the way it needs to be going through. And so I think the change that has to happen is the mindset of owners, and you can't force them to do it. So if they do not go through the process the way that it needs to be going through, then I think there has to be some sort of punishment or retribution. Like you said, we
I
can't.
think the only way it changes is by changing the owners. The owners have to look like
Right? No, I
America.
agree.
That's the only
I
way.
agree.
It's the
I
only way.
agree, and that's been a long process that a lot of people have been trying to go. And like everything else, it's a rich boys club that you got to figure out how to get in.
Yeah,
And
and
there's
that's the
not a
thing.
lot of.
There's only a certain amount of people that actually can get in the damn club. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. 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 And the sad part is we probably have a bunch of minorities that can do it. They're just not Americans. That's what I've realized.
Great point. Yep.
That's what I've realized, that the billionaire ones that we need, they're not here. Most of them are not. We have a bunch of millionaires, and maybe we get like maybe Rihanna, but she wouldn't give a crap about buying a team.
No.
You know what I'm saying? But she's only worth 1 billion. And I say that like that's so stupid that I just say she's only worth 1 billion, but these guys that own these teams and families are worth several
Double
billion.
digit, yeah, hundreds,
Yeah.
tens of millions, billions, or
Yeah,
hundreds of
dude.
billions.
Yeah,
Yep.
so it's a lot of money. So it's like it's crazy stuff. And then some of the minorities, I noticed that like Shad Khan, he's not American.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So like the few minority owners we have, they're not American. So it's like, damn, dude, and the Bolins only because the father died now, and that's why the women are running it now. But eventually, that's going to go somewhere, and I think that's part of the opening of the door there. The Broncos have to try to find a minority owner that steps up or a minority group that steps up. But it has to be that's the only way, because I don't think the problem is you have to prove that there is a negative light to the process before you can actually punish somebody, because they can go through the process, Cam, but then they'll lie to us. They'll just play the game like they've been doing it forever. So that doesn't help us. That doesn't gain anything.
I think you're right on the money, Big O. That ownership has to change for real change to happen. I think that's the core of the issues. Whether you agree in the method of some people of how they're doing it, whether it's Flores or other people, I think that a lot of these, the whole goal of bringing this to light is to say that ownership has to change their mind, and if not, then ownership has to change.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know at least, I guess Stephen Ross, I guess he hasn't won, so that's the only thing that he's got left. But dude, the guy spends, and he's got one of the most diverse teams that exist in the NFL, if not the most diverse team that exists in the NFL. So he has changed, or he has, adjusted to what they need to do. So we need either more owners to be like Stephen Ross, or you need to find owners that look different than Stephen Ross. One of the two. I don't know what it is.
Ideally, we have some more black ownership sooner than later, but we'll see. It's a long process.
Get some women owning teams. That's what we need.
Amen.
We need some women owning teams.
Right.
That would be
Amen.
that would be cool to get some women owning teams, because women will be a little bit more liberal about everything, and they'll look at everything a little bit more equally, maybe. Overall. All right, what are you working on besides they're saying you're working on your I caught you in the middle of your garage working on your car or something like that.
So I'm actually in the business center of my hotel. I'm out in LA actually on a fellowship trip with a few of my best friends. So I am not in the garage, but I am in a business center. I felt like this was the quietest place I could find with good lighting, because we talked about my lighting. So I want
kind
to
of
make
looks
sure
like
it was
graffiti.
good.
At first, it looks like the walls are graffiti, and it's like a rec room, and your kids had the chalk, and they just had fun with it. You know?
Yeah, a little bit, right? Yeah. So
But I give you credit. Some of the best lighting you've had lately here in some of your hits. So that's
just
strong.
Just for you. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna have strong Wi-Fi. I'm gonna have strong lighting, and I'll be in the garage area.
Good stuff. All right, follow him on Twitter at Cameron Wolfe, as he's traveling the world every time, joining in with us. I appreciate you, my brother. Safe travels. We'll catch up with you next week.
All right, sounds good, Big O. Appreciate you.
Got it. There you go. The great Cameron Wolfe and our KSDT Miami Dolphins report.
This
is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.